Special grades are broken in Jujutsu Kaisen. They're all so strong, which makes ranking them surprisingly hard, but we're gonna do it anyway. Here is the basic criteria I used, and let's get into it. Oh, also the reason we're doing 6 instead of 4 is because Kenjaku and Sukuna are being included, and I will explain why in both their respective sections. Starting in last, we have Geto. We all know he's the weakest, right? As unfortunate as it is, Geto is pretty underwhelming for a special grade. He's more of a special grade by technicality than anything else, as the qualification of being able to take over a nation is something he would be able to do thanks to his cursed spirits, and not because he is actually an exceedingly strong or competent sorcerer. That being said, he's still really strong. I mean, he's a special grade, of course he is. Cursed spirit manipulation gives Geto a near unmatched level of versatility, allowing him to control any cursed spirit that he can beat or those that are significantly weaker than him automatically. This inherently gives him thousands of tools, if not more, giving him something that can fit almost every situation. On top of this, he's also really strong at hand-to-hand combat, and he has the inventory cursed spirit, meaning he can easily store and switch between cursed tools as he sees fit. But unfortunately, that's kind of all he has going for him. We never see him use a domain or reverse curse technique, and he also kind of lacks intelligence, as Kenjaku made better use of the cursed spirit manipulation technique than Geto did, despite having the technique for far less time than the special grade. On top of this, his ceiling for strength seems to be quite a bit lower than the rest of the special grades, as even a special grade cursed spirit was one shot by a regular attack from Yuki, and maximum Uzumaki, while strong, doesn't really compare to attacks like Hollow Purple, Rika's Laser, or Yuki's Black Hole. Obviously, the main reason for all of these weaknesses is because Geto was the villain of Jujutsu Kaisen 0, which had a way less developed power system than the full series of Jujutsu Kaisen, and as a result, the tools available to Geto were far more limited. But that doesn't really matter here, as we are ranking based off the strength that we see, and in that department, Geto is undoubtedly the weakest special grade, and by a pretty wide margin. I mean, the special grade at 5th is Yuki, and she is miles ahead of where he was. I feel bad putting Yuki this low, but there's really nowhere else to put her. She is incredibly strong and displayed the single biggest feat in Jujutsu Kaisen, being of course her black hole, which would have destroyed the whole world if her own will and Tengen's barriers had not restricted it. This black hole is obviously a self-sacrificing attack, but it still outscales every other peak attack like Hollow Purple, Furnace, and maximum Uzumaki. Obviously, black hole isn't the only attack Yuki has in her arsenal, as it's actually a byproduct of Yuki's ability, Star Rage, which lets her add virtual mass to all of her attacks, allowing her to hit incredibly hard. Just one punch from her split both of Kenjaku's arms and broke the barrier of the Star Corridor multiple times over. I just want to focus on that first part though for a second. I don't think you understand the sheer amount of force it takes to cut something with a blunt attack. Try cutting a vegetable with your fist and see how it goes. So Yuki cutting through Kenjaku's arms with a punch is even more impressive than it may seem, as she clearly did it with no issue at all. On top of this, she also one-shot a cursed spirit, also with zero issue. This was done with her Shikigami Garuda, which is a versatile snake that Yuki can apply her own curse technique to. This gives her a surprising amount of versatility with her technique, as she can use Garuda in any way she believes is ideal. We saw her use Garuda to one-shot that cursed spirit, restrain Kenjaku, and as a whip to do massive damage to the arena. She's also kind of a crazy fighter, keeping pressure on Kenjaku after getting hit by his domain's sure hit, and pulling off the black hole after she had been cut in half. She can also use reverse curse technique, which seems to be of high quality and has a domain expansion, but we never actually see what it is. So with all this, why is Yuki down here in 5th? Well, we're ranking special grades. Every single one is impossibly strong. There are literally no weak ones. Even Geto is still stronger than the vast majority of the sorcerers in this series. We're ranking the toughest of the tough, and as such, there is just some extremely tough competition. Plus, her technique's not perfect. The more damage Yuki takes, the weaker Star Rage is. This is a pretty big deal, considering as a battle goes on, more damage will be sustained, and as far as I know, there's no other special grades that have this drawback. Plus, she straight up lost to the sorcerer at 4th, so she literally can't be any higher. And yes, that does mean I think Kenjaku is at 4th, with Yuta at 3rd. These two being at 3rd and 4th shouldn't be a surprise, but the order they're in might be. We'll get more into why I decided on this order in a second, but first I want to talk about Kenjaku themselves. Kenjaku is one of the 2 high-end-era special grades in Jujutsu Kaisen, and boy does he bring a lot to the table. His main ability is colloquially known as body hopping, which is not great offensively, but allows him to use the abilities of anyone whose body he inhabits. We see this primarily in the form of Geto, which allows him to use the cursed spirit manipulation technique. But he also gets to keep the technique of the body he was in before, so he can also use Kaori's technique, which is basically gravity manipulation. Despite how strong both of these techniques are, I don't think either one is the main benefit of Kenjaku's body hopping. What makes it great is that it has allowed Kenjaku to gain over 1,000 years of knowledge knowledge and battle experience. This is more than anyone else in the series by a wide margin, and it shows in the fights we see him take on. He has an almost uncanny ability to understand opponents' techniques and understand their thought process on the battlefield. His vast experience also helps him understand his own techniques, allowing him to far outperform even those that had the techniques before him. I mean, he invented mini Uzumakis and relied almost entirely on the curse technique reversal of anti-gravity system, giving both techniques even more versatility and usability than they originally had. And on top of all that, he's also one of the best hand-to-hand combat fighters in the series according to Gege himself. And then there's Yuta, who is just absolutely insane. Let's start with the basics. Yuta has the second biggest cursed energy pool in the series, behind only Sukuna. This is inherently a huge advantage, as it means his cursed energy reinforcement abilities are going to be much higher than even the average special grade, and it lets him use his cursed technique with little worry of running out of cursed energy. Even if he does run low, he can just source more from his Shikigami Rika, which is also extremely broken. The Shikigami Rika is not as strong as the cursed Rika from Jujutsu Kaisen 0, but she's still really strong. In addition to being able to store cursed energy for Yuta, she also stores cursed techniques and is able to fight alongside him, making any fight a 2v1. She can also follow basic instructions too, which just adds to her usefulness. And then there is, of course, Yuta's cursed technique, which is also broken. It's Copy, which, as the name implies, allows him to copy cursed techniques. So far, we have seen him copy cursed speech, sky manipulation, Sukuna's technique, Kenjaku's technique, Jacob's ladder, a Shikigami control technique, Charles's technique, and more. This gives him a huge amount of versatility, but he can only use the copy techniques when fully connected to Rika, as he has copied too many techniques for his own brain to store. He also has a domain expansion where he can use any of the techniques he copied as the sure hit, and he can also output reverse curse technique to use on others, and he can also use it on himself too. Quite the deep kits on both of these characters. So why do I think Yuta is stronger than Kenjaku? Well, it's complicated, but you know what's not complicated? Subscribing. Subscribing is the best way for you to stay up to date on all the videos from this channel, and it's the best way to support this channel besides just watching the video. So if you want to support the efforts that goes into these videos and get these videos more directly to you, subscribing is the best way to do that. See, when I do these rankings, I usually try to look at how the individual does in all circumstances. So not just how they do in a head-to-head against the people I am comparing them to, but also how they would perform against cursed spirits and general curse users. I also try to take huge accomplishments into account, but these can skew perspective quite a bit, so I do it with care. The issue with Kenjaku and Yuta is they are pretty much evenly matched in how they would perform against cursed spirits and curse users, as Kenjaku can easily defeat most cursed spirits thanks to being able to absorb spirits 2 grids below him with no issue, and Yuta can output positive energy, meaning he can one-shot them easily. There is a slight edge here for Yuta, but Kenjaku has a slight edge for cursed users, as Yuta is more likely to let them survive, whereas Kenjaku will just kill whoever he needs, however he finds entertaining. They also both have a number of great feats, such as Kenjaku orchestrating and pulling off the culling games, and winning a 2v1 against Yuki and Chozo. Yuta, on the other hand, executed a plan against Sukuna with perfection twice. And he also soloed Sendai, which was by far the strongest colony in the culling games, and he did it without too much of an issue. So for all intents and purposes, we can say that they are evenly matched in all areas, which means it comes down to the head-to-head, which I think is slightly Yuta favored. The biggest issue with the head-to-head is we just don't know how these two domains would interact, which makes it really hard to tell how a battle of domains would go. Both obviously have super strong domains that are extremely refined, so I think it's fair to say the domains would be contested, and inside the domain, Yuta would likely have an advantage, as he would still be able to use techniques from the swords strewn about as they are not part of the guaranteed hit, and Rika would be active. Kenjaku would also have curse techniques available to him, but cursed spirit manipulation wouldn't be that useful for him, and even gravity might not be that great for him considering Yuta can use sky manipulation, which should allow him to manipulate the area affected by gravity to avoid it or launch a surprise attack. The gravity also does not damage Shikigami as we saw with Garuda, which means Rika should be able to take a hit from gravity and easily counterattack. This kind of counterattack should be hard for Kenjaku to block, considering Rika can be large enough to palm Sukuna, who is larger than Kenjaku. So in a clash of domains, Yuta should win if his domain doesn't collapse to Kenjaku's gravity from the outside, as Kenjaku's domain is barrierless, meaning that if his domain has a larger radius than Yuta's domain, Yuta would likely lose in a situation similar to Gojo. Even if this does happen though, I don't think Yuta's completely out of the race. Yuki survived Kenjaku's domain, so I don't think Yuta would be instantly killed, and he has better reverse curse technique than her, and Rika is also a more powerful Shikigami than Garuda as well. There's also some ambiguity around whether or not Kenjaku's domain is actually barrierless, as Tengen dissolved the naturally occurring pure barrier to destroy Kenjaku's domain, insinuating he doesn't have a barrierless domain but instead used the other domain to construct his own domain. Regardless of this questionability, I think Yuta takes the Battle of Domains 6 out of 10 times. He has more raw damage output than Kenjaku, so he should be able to force Kenny into technique burnout and then really lay into the Heian era sorcerer. I also think Yuta wins outside his domain as well, but it would be equally close as long as he wraps things up in under 5 minutes. There's really no cursed spirits that can threaten Yuta, and as we already stated, gravity can't threaten Rika. So really the only way Kenjaku could potentially win is hand-to-hand combat, but that is a really hard win with a Rika that can change sizes at will and a sword that gives Yuta more range than Kenjaku. So while I do think these two would be incredibly close, I think I have to put Yuta in third and Kenjaku in fourth by a tiny bit. And now we come to the big two. We all knew Gojo and Sukuna would be number 1 and 2, right? The real question is what order? This is about as hard a question to answer as you may think. Both these guys are absolutely broken. Let's start with Sukuna. Personally, I think Sukuna's most broken aspect is not his abilities or battle experience. It's his raw hit-taking ability. This dude has taken a beating from almost every notable character in the series and has brushed off most attacks. He's eaten 3 hollow purples with relatively little damage compared to what they usually do. He's also survived 7 black flashes too, and a stab directly to the heart, and he just rallies like it's nothing. It's straight up crazy. This tankiness allows him to trade blows in a way that most characters can't, and allows him to pretty easily counterattack his opponents because he can't just brush off attacks so easily. And how does he counterattack? Well, it depends which form he's in. We've seen a few iterations of Sukuna across the series, from when he was in Yuji's body to Meguna to the most recent reincarnation of Heian Sukuna. Because each of these have their own abilities, I don't want to go over each one in depth, so I'll just say what's different. Yuji Sukuna is kind of like base form Sukuna. He has Cleave, Dismantle, Furnace, and his domain. Meguna has all those plus the 10 Shadows technique with Mahoraga tamed. Although we never actually see him use Furnace in this form, it's still pretty heavily implied that it's there. Reincarnated Heian Sukuna is similar to Yuji Sukuna, except he also has the Slash that cuts the world, which is an adaptation of Dismantle that allows Sukuna to cut the space an opponent is in rather than the opponent themselves. This move has ended a number of sorcerers in the fight against Sukuna because it is just that broken. All of these, combined with his 4 arms, enormous cursed energy pool, and efficiency that is only second to the 6 eyes, making Sukuna an absolutely broken opponent. Oh, I should also mention that his domain is barrierless, which basically means that it just destroys an area up to 200 meters across. I mean, look, we all know how broken this guy is. I'm sure we don't have to go in depth into all of his abilities, just like Gojo, because I'm sure some of y'all know these abilities better than I do. Gojo is the unrivaled sorcerer of the modern era, mostly thanks to his limitless technique, which allows him to control cursed energy at an atomic level, in combination with the 6 eyes, which gives him insane cursed energy efficiency and extremely high perception as well. Within Limitless, there are 4 techniques: red, which pushes away, blue, which draws towards, purple, which combines red and blue to essentially destroy anything it touches, and infinity, which is the neutral form of Limitless and probably the most broken aspect of the technique, as it gives Gojo a force field around his entire body that requires extremely specific conditions to pass, such as domain amplification, cursed tools that force the stoppage of a curse technique like the inverted spear of heaven and the black rope, or the slash that cuts the world, which required 5 adaptations for Mahoraga to create. Gojo does have a broken domain as well, and the ability to teleport too, but that's a bit ambiguous. He's also the best in this series at hand-to-hand combat, which is confirmed by the author themselves, and he also just has that it factor. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but we can tell pretty clearly when we compare how Gojo fought to how Yuta fought in Gojo's body that it truly was Gojo that was strong and not his technique or his 6 eyes. He truly was one of the honored ones along with Sukuna, which makes ranking this duo extremely hard. Much like Yuta and Kenjaku, Gojo and Sukuna are pretty much evenly matched. They're equal in every way. They both have no problem dealing with special grade cursed spirits. They both have no issue dealing with opposing sorcerers with very specific exceptions, like Yuta in Gojo's body or Toji with the inverted spear of heaven. But even these exceptions were only able to be a threat in the first place because their respective targets were in a weakened state. On top of this, both of their domains are equal, as is made very clear during their fight. It's made as clear as possible that these two are equals, except they're only equals in some cases. See, part of what makes ranking these two so hard is that there's 3 different versions of Sukuna, all with varying capabilities to bypass infinity, which is a must-have if Sukuna wants to beat Gojo. Traditional Heian Sukuna doesn't have a way, Yuji Kuna doesn't have a way, Meguna only has a way after 5 adaptations to infinity by Mahoraga, which isn't guaranteed, and reincarnated Heian Sukuna has the world slash but under a binding vow. This means that Sukuna doesn't have a great way to get through infinity in a battle, and we see this during the Gojo and Sukuna fight. There's also the fact that Gojo was kind of nerfed by Gege going into the fight against Sukuna. Like, look at what Just Red did against Jogo and Toji and compare it to what it did in the fight against Sukuna. It's way less destructive and pretty significantly less powerful. This could partially be because Sukuna is stronger, but that doesn't completely explain the lack of destruction. There's also Infinite Void, which melted the brains of special grade cursed spirits for a number of minutes with just 0.2 seconds of exposure. Meanwhile, in the fight against Sukuna, he was exposed for multiple seconds and was immediately fine the second the domain closed. This was kind of explained by him putting the effect on Megumi's mind, but he was still clearly affected by it while the domain was active. So it doesn't make a ton of sense that he was able to do this, and it also doesn't make a ton of sense that he was able to do it after being exposed to Infinite Void for so long. This is all to say that I think Gojo is stronger by a tiny bit. Their fight was pretty much a coin toss of who would win, but I think Gojo wins the coin toss 51 or 52% of the time. Like, that's how close it is. These two are the honored ones for a reason, but I do think Gojo is slightly stronger overall, as no matter what iteration of Sukuna we look at, he always has to struggle to get through infinity for some reason, and Sukuna doesn't really have an equal problem for Gojo. Sure, he's highly durable, but we saw what a Hollow Purple or two was able to do to him. So my official ranking is Sukuna in second and Gojo in first. If you made it to the end of this video, please be sure to subscribe. It would really mean a lot to me, and you obviously enjoy the content, so why not? Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you soon for our next video.